Hello and welcome to Composer Talks with White Bear PR. Today we have a special workshop for you called Anatomy of Creating a Character Theme for Television with composer Penka Kouneva. A few words about Penka. She has composed on iconic video games such as League of Legends, Prince of Persia, and The Mummy. She co-scored the primetime network television series for the CW Pandora, which she co-composed with Kramer. And beside writing music for film, she has also written the music for a NASA-themed park at the Kennedy Space Center. And last year in 2019, I had the honor to see Penka and her piece that she commissioned and performed by the Los Angeles Philharmonic at the Hollywood Bowl, performed in front of 18,000 people. The America in Space concert performed her piece, The Woman's Astronaut. Hello, Penka.
Hello, Thomas. It's such a great honor to be your guest, and I'm really happy to share about Pandora, the TV show. It was a tremendous honor to be brought in on this project as a co-composer. I have known Joe Kramer for about 15 years, and I also have known the showrunner, Mark Altman, for about 17 years. But throughout all this time, Mark Altman had a working relationship with Joe. So Joe was his composer, which was a tremendous benefit for me because when I entered this relationship, Joe became my mentor. And it was a very kind of a smooth entry, and we didn't have to reinvent the wheel because Joe already had a very well-established collaborative relationship with Mark Altman. So the reason I was brought in because the production schedule was exceptionally compressed. It was a weekly production schedule where we had only 4 days to compose 30 minutes of music, which is usually how much music you have on a sci-fi, adventure, action, drama TV show. And Joe needed help just to deliver 30 minutes of music every week. So I was brought in as a co-composer. I was brought in because Joe's first set of directions about the style and the tone was this. He said, Mark Altman adores Star Trek, Star Wars, Starship Troopers. He lives in that whole world of orchestral music about space wars. And Jerry Goldsmith, John Williams, Starship Troopers, all these scores were our guiding line. However, once we got into the show, then there was more modern tone, more hybrid approach. But the reason why I was brought in is because of my orchestral background. So I wanted to now open the slides and discuss in great detail. So I will begin the screen sharing. Okay, so here we are. And here's this slideshow. So Pandora was on CW, is a show about college students at the Earthfleet Academy. They fly spaceships and they fight galactic enemies. The way the show is described is in the style of Star Trek, Buffy, Riverdale. So one of the greatest joys for me as a composer is to write the secondary themes, the secondary character themes. Joe had the duty to compose the main theme, which is very iconic. It has 3 notes, which repeat 3 times. And I have found incredible joy in actually focusing on these secondary characters because they have the intrigue, they propel the narrative forward, and they also have very specific qualities that I have to bring out in the music. Our showrunner, Mark Altman, suggested to us that at all times we have themes, that the whole score is very thematic because there are many secondary characters and many plots and subplots. So he wanted to have that iconic sound, almost like think in terms of Wagnerian leitmotifs. Every character has its own musical signature. And then what ended up happening, Joe and I, he wrote many themes and I wrote a bunch of themes. And then we ended up composing a lot of variations on each other's themes. So I wanted to hone in and speak how I approached one of the secondary characters and how I created his theme. And then Joe wrote some amazing variations. So his name is Raylan, and he's one of the students. He's an alien humanoid, and his race is called Zotarians. Obviously, in this show, Pandora, there was this huge mythology that was really wonderfully constructed by Mark Altman, and many races, many enemies, and allies. So essentially, Raylan is the archetype of Spock. He's very intelligent, he's very thoughtful, rational, very articulate. His father is the Terran ambassador. However, we don't know his loyalties, because just before the episode, just before the season 1 started, the Earth had this gigantic war with the Zetarians where they almost wiped each other out. So, and he's a Zetarian, so he was like the arch enemy up until yesterday. So we don't know if he's playing a double game, whether he's spying on Pandora. And Pandora has this mystery because we don't know who she is. We don't know her identity. She was adopted. So throughout the whole season 1, the character arc of Pandora is to reveal her identity. The whole show has a very progressive, very forward-looking vibe, and the characters are really amazingly constructed. So Raylan could be spying on her, or he pretends to be her friend, but we don't know. And ultimately, he's that kind of archetype of a lonely outcast who gets bullied all the time, who has to work so hard to be accepted by his peers. He gets beaten up a couple of times really viciously. Raylan also has unrequited love for Pandora, and these are all the qualities I had to capture in my theme. So to capture that longing to be accepted, I composed this melody that leaps up, and it leaps up by tritone to be unconventional. Also, the chords I chose are kind of almost very unconventional. They're not like typical chords because he's an alien. And also because he's not trustworthy, or at least at the beginning he is not shown to be trustworthy, I chose chords that never resolve. So they're kind of very unstable. There's no tonal center, and the chords are not really related. So these were my musical choices to create that theme of the alien whom we don't know who he is. So here is what the theme looks like. The melody leaps, the chords are kind of unrelated, and they don't really resolve in any conventional way, just to kind of convey that he's shifty. So then I wrote also 3 variations on that motif, because it's really important in TV to have variety. And in this case, I used reharmonization of the same theme. This time I wanted to emphasize the loneliness, because he's the lonely outsider. And I used minor chords just because he's just a, lonely alien. So one thing I do as a composer in cases like this, I sometimes mix major and minor chords, and I'm very careful to balance how many major chords I have and how many minor chords I have, because they create that sense of ambivalence, they create that sense of longing, and it's just more interesting than using only minor chords, which then become very dark, or only major chords, which are too positive. So here is the musical example, and so basically I was playing with all these choices. Now I'd like to go ahead and play for you Raylan's theme, and here's what it sounds like. So here, there's a variation that Joe Kramer wrote on my theme. It's a little bit darker, and he chose darker instruments like, duduk and low strings. And here I'd like to play Joe Kramer's variation on Raylan's theme. So I would like to now shift and discuss the main theme that was composed by Joe Kramer. He only composed it. Again, the instruction by the showrunner, Mark Altman, was that the theme has to be mysterious. And it has to be very short, very iconic, almost like a jingle, because it has to be memorable. So the approach that Joe thought would be the best is to approach it almost like a songwriter. So he decided to just take the word Pandora and set it to music. So Pandora, 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 with a reharmonization. So there are again these three variations that you hear. So that was his approach, and it's arranged in this kind of modern arrangement. And that's the Pandora theme. We'll hear it at the end. Okay, so besides the Pandora theme, the other theme that Joe composed by himself is something we call the Academy theme. We use it all the time. We use this theme in major, in minor. It is basically when we see scenes at the Academy, classrooms, it goes for a whole bunch of characters, and it signifies their heroic deeds or their fortitude, good morals. So that theme got used a lot. And I'd like to play it now. So the Academy theme has a very typical opening of this open fifth, which always signifies heroes, heroism, and we sometimes use this theme for Pandora or for any other characters, but mostly for group situations with the protagonist. It's an ensemble show, so all the college kids, get this theme. Now, another theme that we got a huge amount of mileage is what Joe calls the conspiracy theme. He also wrote that theme. That's also kind of a mysterious, shifty music where, because one of the big parts of Pandora, of course, is the conspiracy. We don't know who she is. There's all these factions that are trying to recruit her to be on their side. There are all these people who appear to be one person, but then actually are somebody else, spies, and people who just want to use Pandora for their benefit. So there's this mystery and this conspiracy always, and intrigue. So this theme got used a lot. One thing that I just wanted to do, because I thought it would be really cool, and use it for the last episode of the season 1, I wanted to find a way to combine all three main themes in the same musical fabric, in the same cue. That's the Pandora theme, the conspiracy theme, and the Academy themes. And this is kind of more of a musical arranger, creating variations. So and these themes sort of lend themselves because they're so iconic. They have so few notes and they're so powerful. So what I did, I used the Pandora theme and the Academy theme as melodies. And I used the conspiracy theme as kind of a counter melody or counterpoint. And that's a lesson I learned from Beethoven's symphonies. I mean, he often does that in his symphonies where he would combine the themes vertically so they sound at the same time. And I think it's just exciting, memorable way to just recapitulate the themes again and remind the listener, because the whole entire season, we built the whole score based on themes, probably about close to 10 themes. So here is the musical example of the three themes, which I'll play. Yeah, so overall, Joe and I worked really hard. We had 4 days to deliver 35 minutes of music. For the last two episodes, it was close to 40 minutes of music. It was really wall to wall. And how we did the assignments, um, Joe, I usually got to do reels 1, 2, and 3. However, if within these reels, if there was any of the things that Joe wanted to work on, he got to score them. And then he got to do not reels, acts 4, 5, and 6. So I did acts 1, 2, and 3, and he did acts 4, 5, and 6. This way we could create a continuity between the cues. Because otherwise it would have been very difficult if he kind of plucked out a couple of cues in each act and I sort of, so usually I did 3 contiguous acts, 1, 2, 3, and then he did 4, 5, and 6. And the only exception was if there's like one theme that would repeat throughout and then he wanted to score it. So we try to be very intelligent. Joe was really concerned that each episode has musical cohesion, musical flow, and it's not like schizophrenic, as he said, because the musical flow is so important in TV, and you really should feel that the music is totally seamless. It's as if composed by one entity. And my past experience with co-composing was very extensive co-composing for Steve Jablonsky on a number of video games. And that was my training grounds to understand that in co-composing situations, the most important thing is that stylistic cohesion. And also the most important thing is identifying my strengths and also how my strengths complement the style of the composer whom I'm co-composing with. And in most collaborative situations, that is the case. The music has to be very smooth, very consistent. And usually, like in this particular case, Joe brought me in, so I was very careful to follow his directions. He mentored me, like before I even started the first episode, and this is the same thing I did with Jablonsky on Transformers game in 2008. Before I wrote the first actual note that entered into the first episode, the second episode was my first composing. I composed a whole bunch of what we call practice cues. Like for Pandora, I wrote probably 15 practice cues, just doing variations on Joe's themes, just to kind of become fluent in that process and get his feedback, understand his taste. This was also our first collaboration. Unlike Jablonsky, whose music I've known since 2004, and our first collaboration was in 2008, I had like 4 years of continuous work with Jablonsky, and I knew his music really well. Joe Kramer, I only knew his music just from playing his soundtracks. So we had to jump into a collaboration really without knowing each other, personally or professionally very closely. So for me to prepare for that collaboration, I did like about 15 practice demos before we actually started. And on the first time, so he scored 101 by himself, episode 101. Episode 102 is when I jumped in. And he had about maybe 10 notes, like 10 just remarks on 30 minutes, 15 minutes of music. And then episode 4, it was like awesome, no notes. The greatest Joe is because he's been working with Mark Altman for so many years. He knew Mark's tastes so closely, and he was able to give me such precise direction, like with surgical precision. Oh, Mark is not going to like this. And it was always framed, Mark is not going to like this, he'll take this drum or whatever. So I had the incredible benefit of entering a relationship that is so fluent and so well established. And I was mentored, how to really deliver to the client's expectations and taste without rewrites. For composers, the bane of our existence is revisions, extensive changes. And in TV, when you have to crank out 30 minutes of music in 4 days, that would have been very difficult. But thanks to that mentoring by Joe Kramer, we didn't have any revisions. Mark was approving everything 100%, absolutely approving everything. So that was also one tremendous benefit, and I'm just really grateful. And it was an incredibly joyful experience. Mark really loved our work. He was incredibly complimentary. And I'm just super happy and grateful and really energized and inspired. That was my return to TV scoring. Before my daughter was born, I was scoring like monster movies for the Sci-Fi Channel, and I did 5 of those. And just as I was beginning to build a body of work in TV, I had my child. So I left TV and started scoring games. So all in all, it was a fantastic experience.
Thank you, Penka. Thanks for this insightful workshop and talking us into the anatomy of creating a character theme. Now, you mentioned that Joe is a mentor to you, but I know you were very passionate about mentoring young composers, and you do that a lot. Why is this so important to you?
So every time I work on a job, I'm expected to deliver at the stratospheric studio level. And young people, emerging composers, emerging orchestrators, fresh out of school, don't have that depth of experience. So it's my job, it's my duty to set them for success, to prepare them for success. So every time when I had a team, and I still have teams, except now I work with seasoned people, but when my daughter was born, I built these teams of younger people because I felt I kind of wanted to work with them for a long time. And it was really important for me to coach them, just train them so deeply, because I was getting studio films, I needed orchestrators, studio jobs, and it was really important for me to train my team to work at that level. So again, doing a lot of preemptive, training and workshops, and sharing tons of scores and walking them through their mistakes, whatever they did that was not at the industry level, I kind of walked them through that. They were all very quick learners. So I felt compelled to really share that knowledge, not because it's just good karma, but also because for anybody who wants to work at the studio level, that level of expertise is expected. And that's the only way to progress and get jobs. Same thing with composing or arranging. If I hired additional arrangers, additional composers on my games or albums, people doing arrangements, I gave them very specific instructions, and I set the expectations very clearly. There's nothing greater than to know your framework, to know your parameters and the expectations. That's how you set up people for success. And with Joe Kramer and I, he understood. I mean, I was returning to TV after a pretty long hiatus. I mean, for about 10 years, I worked in video games and released my albums. So there was a learning curve just to kind of set up my protocol, my workflow, my own sort of daily routine, because in TV, you just really move with breakneck speed. So again, he set me up for success. That's the most valuable thing in that relationship with a mentor, to have somebody who really cares about your success. So that's why I'm really passionate about mentoring, and I continue to do it a lot. And the most important thing for me is sharing knowledge, setting the expectations, setting best practices, and ultimately I want all my assistants to be the most successful, because then they help me, they help the job, then they get jobs on their own, they know the best practices. It's just a good thing. So I've been doing it. I mean, I have mentored about over 60 people, and out of these 60 people, about full 25%, full quarter have been women composers. And I kind of gave them a lot of, demos and smaller jobs and things I didn't have time for. Or if I had 10 jobs colliding at the same time, I kind of farmed out a lot of work. And all of that farming out always went along with tons of, rivers of emails of instructions and a lot of mentoring, a lot of feedback. Because I feel, especially women have to be given these opportunities. They have to try and maybe make mistakes and be in a safe environment, which is having a mentor always. My job is to provide a safe environment for them to learn and learn skills and learn best practices. So this is one part of my legacy in Hollywood that I consider to be very, very significant, mentoring younger emerging composers and orchestrators.
This is wonderful. Thank you so much for that. Now, our business is very much also about connections. And you talk about, when you arrived here from Bulgaria and you didn't have any connections, you really didn't know many people here, and how you build your network and how important it is. So what advice would you give a young composer who doesn't have a network, who has no connections, be it to other collaborators, but also to filmmakers? What advice would you give them if they feel discouraged? What's the philosophy behind it?
The first connection always comes as a referral from your professors from the school that you studied. So the only connection I had was Patrick Williams, the Emmy-winning TV composer, who also is a Duke alumnus. So he was my Duke connection. And I was introduced to him as the brilliant Bulgarian Duke, and also he knew me from my orchestral experience. So the first jobs he gave me was copyist and orchestrator on his TV movies. At the time, he was like doing TV movies on a roll. So it's a combination between building personal friendships so that people get to know you as a person with your passions, with your talent and skills, and also building a body of work. These two go hand in hand. When you have a body of work, then you start to get more introductions, more referrals, and you say, that's my body of work, this is what I've done. You can't just be making friendships and hope for a professional opportunity to happen if you have no body of work. And for me, coming to Hollywood, that was my orchestral work before. So I always say we work in the business of opening doors, and every opportunity is going to be a person opening a door for you because they feel passionate about your talent, they trust in your ability to deliver, they feel energized by your talent, by your growth, by your artistry. And it's these people who open the doors that will propel you forward. So I would say build relationships, tell everybody about your film or music or orchestral score, anything that you have that's a good thing, like, film premiere or good, amazing notation of a horror score. I chased Bruce Fowler, the head orchestrator of Hans Zimmer, 4 years after Liz Finch and Patrick Williams made an introduction. And he had a very big team. He didn't have a need for yet another person asking him for jobs. But I would never relent. Like, I would always send him once every couple of months, once every 6 months. I just would say, Bruce, look at this crazy graphic notation I did for this horror score. And he never replied to my emails. I mean, I'm sure he was getting them because I was emailing. He never replied, but I didn't quit. I just kept sending him examples of graphic notation for horror music. Think of, Christopher Young, these kind of very orchestral, effecty scores. So that's how I got the break with Bruce Fowler. 4 years after I started, I was on his radar. And I would say the body of work and the relationships is how you make steps forward. You just keep building experience and body work. People have to trust you because obviously Bruce Fowler works at the highest level with Hans Zimmer, and Bruce was the one who introduced me to Steve Jablonski. I owe my career to Bruce Fowler, my entire career, because he opened the most important doors. My most precious clients for whom I orchestrate, who are also genius composers: Neil Acree, the Blizzard composer, Nathan Barr, the composer of tons of Emmy-winning shows, and he's an Emmy-winning composer, and Jablonski. These three relationships Bruce Fowler made in 2004 and 2005, and ever since then, been my amazing clients. So just to summarize, you need to make friendships on a personal level so people can trust you, and you have to continuously work on jobs. So you can say, look at this job, look at this score, look what I did, check it out. And this way they know you're on a progressive path in your career.
And never give up, because you were in there for the long run, as you can see, in 4 years, and then someone opened the doors for you. And I know nowadays you're opening the doors to so many young composers and women composers. So thank you. Thanks for sharing your knowledge, your wisdom, and it was nice to chat with you. Thank you so much, Penka.
Thank you for the honor to be your guest. It's a great duty, and I really love being able to share. So take good care. Good luck to all people who are listening to this wonderful podcast.
Thank you, Penka. Bye-bye.